DW Inside Europe.
Hello and welcome. I'm Helen Sini in Germany. On today's programme, NATO says Ukraine's path to membership is irreversible.
Putin sent a very horrible and bloody postcard to each and every one here. What he thinks of us being gathered here, with an ultrasonic missile that attacked a children's hospital in Kiev. That's on us, if we're going to react to that.
Uncertainty in France after Sunday's shock setback for the far right. What does the UK's new Prime Minister really stand for? And Viktor Orban's rogue peace mission. Those stories and more coming up. NATO has marked its 75th anniversary in the city where it was born back in 1949 with just a dozen countries. The political environment in Washington, D.C. was even more complicated than usual, as the now 32 allies sought to present a united front against Russia and for Ukraine. Terry Schultz has the details.
The NATO summit's gala opening ceremony honoring the alliance's past eclipsed for the evening awkward questions about its future, about the possible return to the White House of NATO skeptic Donald Trump, and the viability of U.S. President Joe Biden's candidacy. Biden and the other 31 NATO leaders stood shoulder to shoulder on stage in the Andrew Mellon Auditorium, where NATO's founding document, the Washington Treaty, was signed 75 years ago. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg.
Our alliance was created by people who had lived through two devastating world wars. They were determined that this should never happen again. So they founded NATO with a clear purpose: to preserve peace and safeguard freedom.
Peace and freedom have been preserved in the rest of Europe, but not, of course, in Ukraine, whose defense, Stoltenberg said, was the most urgent issue facing the alliance at its summit. A massive Russian strike on Ukraine's largest children's hospital was an unmissable reminder of why Kyiv constantly pleads for more assistance in air defense. Lithuanian Foreign Minister Gabrielius Landsbergis put it front and center at NATO's public forum.
Putin sent a very horrible and bloody postcard to each and every one here. What he thinks of us being gathered here, with an ultrasonic missile that attacked a children's hospital in Kiev. That's on us, if we're going to react to that.
In the summit's final declaration, Ukraine received new assurances of support from NATO, manifested in announcements that F-16s and additional air defense systems were on their way, that allies had agreed to maintain their level of military contributions for the next year at the same level as now, 40 billion euros, that NATO would take over coordination of training and weapons transfers to Ukraine, and would appoint a senior representative to be present in Kyiv. An important one-word win in the declaration for Ukraine and its supporters, the inclusion of irreversible, referring to Kyiv's path to full Euro-Atlantic integration, including NATO membership, when conditions are right and allies agree. This was among the points in the text argued until the end. Ben Tallis of the Berlin-based Democracy Strategy Initiative thinks Ukraine should be brought into NATO sooner rather than later, and is disappointed that Stoltenberg's efforts to get a longer-term financial commitment failed.
Frankly, not enough of the allies are doing enough to help Ukraine to win, which is fundamentally in all of their interests, but especially in the interest of European allies who are much more directly affected and drastically more vulnerable to the consequences of what happens in Ukraine.
John Denny, a military researcher with the U.S. Army War College and the Atlantic Council, is more complimentary of how far Europe has already come and how much further it might go.
Allies have surprised us in the past, especially over the last 2.5 years, with their commitment to Ukraine as well as to NATO's own security. In early February 2022, it would have seemed absolutely unbelievable for someone to say to you that by the end of the month, center-left Chancellor of Germany is going to devote 100 billion euros to defense spending, and Germany is going to agree to provide arms to a conflict area. I think they could probably surprise us again.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian parliamentarian Kira Rudik had one wish from the summit.
make sure that all political promises that have been made will, in fact, become reality and become weapons in the hands of Ukrainian soldiers.
For the Ukrainian officials present that evening, the song performed at the end of the opening ceremony must have felt sadly very far away.
This is my wish for the world, that peace would find its way to every boy and girl.
Terry Schultz, DW, Brussels.
This is the time for harmony. Let love be the song that everybody sings.
French President Emmanuel Macron attended the NATO summit, and Washington may have been a welcome distraction from the problems that await him on the home front. The snap legislative elections that Macron called have produced a political stalemate in France, and some believe an ungovernable country. In the second round of voting last Sunday, the far right failed to achieve the victory they'd been expecting. That shock result was due to tactical voting. But no party received enough seats for an absolute majority in Parliament. Lisa Bryant has more from Paris.
It wasn't the result many French expected. Instead of a far-right win, the runoff legislative vote last Sunday saw a new leftist bloc surging ahead.
Il fallait le faire. Il fallait le faire. Et non seulement nous l'avons fait.
Now that group, the New Popular Front, claims one of its own should be Prime Minister. For the far-right National Rally Party, it was a bitter setback after coming out ahead in the first round. Speaking to reporters, the party's 28-year-old leader, Jordan Bardella, called it a victory deferred.
I hope in the next elections we will return more prepared, more attentive to French demands and more ready, but we will govern. The wave that supports us is a powerful one.
In fact, nobody has really won these elections. The vote President Macron claimed would clarify the political landscape has only made it muddier. Right now, there are three political blocs: the left, which has the biggest share of seats, President Macron's centrists, who came in second, and the far right. Macron's Prime Minister, Gabriel Attal, remains in office for stability as wrangling over a new government begins.
I think the most likely scenario right now is having the left bloc, le Nouveau Front Populaire, and Ensemble, so the parties supporting Macron, maybe finding a sort of coalition agreement or at least cooperation agreement.
That's Jésine Weber, a Paris-based analyst for the German Marshall Fund Policy Institute.
However, we have to know that France does not have a culture of political coalitions at all. And even within the left bloc, there are huge frictions.
The New Popular Front is a broad leftist alliance from the far-left France Unbowed party led by firebrand politician Jean-Luc Mélenchon to the more moderate socialists, which include former French President François Hollande.
Le président a le pouvoir.
Mélenchon says he is ready to be prime minister, but he is a polarizing figure. A previous parliamentary alliance of these parties, called the NUPES, unraveled over differences on Gaza and the war in Ukraine. In a letter published in French media, Macron is calling for a broad so-called Republican alliance that appears to reject both Mélenchon's France Unbowed party and the far right. Other politicians are talking about a ruling alliance between Macron's centrists and mainstream conservatives. France's political divisions were reflected in the Paris suburb of Neuilly-Plaisance, where last Sunday's runoff pitted a far left against a far right candidate.
Ah oui, moi je vote pour la gauche, hein. Voilà. Parce que j'aime.
Musician Louise Ragout said she voted for the left. She believes in its values.
Comment ça s'appelle, hein? NUPEX, je sais plus.
Yanina Kurkini also voted for the left. The Muslim daughter of Algerian immigrants, she's worried about the anti-immigrant sentiments that are driving the far right's popularity.
We feel very targeted right now, which we weren't before. And I don't understand why. My children are lawyers. They finished their studies.
Retiree Joël Dupuis won't say who he voted for, but he cited law and order concerns reflected in the far-right National Rally's agenda. Still, he says he doesn't like either political option. Between the plague and the cholera, Dupuis says, referring to the far left and right, he chose the plague. What's clear, some analysts say, is these elections have left France weakened, focused on its internal divisions, less likely for now to be a strong European or global presence. Macron has vowed to stay in office. He's expected to retain foreign and defense portfolios per tradition, regardless of the next government's makeup.
Mes chers compatriotes, en démocratie, rien n'est plus normal et sain.
And the National Rally may be disappointed today, but it still won dozens of new parliamentary seats and captured more than 1/3 of the vote. It remains a powerful political force ahead of French presidential elections just 3 years away. Lisa Bryant, DW, Paris.
Well, across the English Channel in the UK, election results there last week were far more conclusive. The UK has a new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who's pledged a national reset after winning a landslide majority. The leader of the left-leaning Labour Party said change would begin immediately and said he stands for stability and moderation. But beyond that, some commentators say his ideology has been hard to pin down. Lucy Taylor has more.
But now our country has voted decisively for change.
In the UK, the transition from one government to the next after an election happens quickly. Within hours of learning he'd won a big majority in Parliament, Keir Starmer was Prime Minister.
Have no doubt that we will rebuild Britain.
And addressing the nation from his new home, 10 Downing Street, he promised a politics that would tread a little lighter in people's lives.
From now on, you have a government unburdened by doctrine, guided only by the determination to serve your interest.
He's a former barrister and director of public prosecutions who's only been in Parliament for 9 years.
Ideologically, he's a little bit more ambiguous than the rest because of that thinner paper trail, that some shorter time in politics.
Dr. Colin Murphy is a lecturer in British politics at Queen Mary University in London. He says, unlike the last man to win an election for Labour, Tony Blair, Keir Starmer hasn't given away much about his political ideology.
So when Blair ran for leader, it was always clear he would be representing what we might call the right of the party. I could talk about others too, Ramsay MacDonald, Clement Attlee. They had long histories in the Labour movement, which meant you could kind of place them factionally and ideologically. Many of them had written books and pamphlets about what they thought socialism meant. Did they take a more Marxist interpretation or an ethical interpretation? We don't have that with Starmer.
Keir Starmer has pledged economic stability and growth and vowed to stick rigidly to his Chancellor's fiscal rules, balancing budgets and lowering debt. But he's facing a series of challenges, from cost of living to the quality of public services. Here's Carl Emerson from the Institute of Fiscal Studies, who says the new government will have to be honest about the pressures it will face.
The statements from Keir Starmer and some of his now cabinet look pretty constraining. They've sort of suggested they don't want any more cuts to public spending. They've suggested they don't want any tax rises over and above the very small set of specific ones they put in their manifesto. They also have stated that they're very committed to get government debt falling, and squaring those three on the latest forecast looks really quite challenging.
But Starmer says he's the man for the job. He spent his campaign trying to define himself in contrast to previous chaotic Conservative leaders by emphasising his standards of conduct and care.
During his tenure in opposition, what Starmer sought to do was to present himself as a rule follower.
But he's faced concern from his own party that his vision is not radical enough in a time of overlapping crises. Dr. Jamie Johnson is a lecturer at Leicester University.
Well, how does that kind of politics deal with a situation in which the problem is not that rules are being broken, but rather that rules are being followed all too well? The climate crisis, for example, is not that we aren't doing what is common sense, but rather that our economic common sense is producing a climate crisis. So there are grounds to be concerned that a form of politics which very self-consciously extols common sense over ideology, how does that deal with an issue which requires us to not just imagine new ideas, but to really effectively deliver them and realise them?
So, with respect...
But for now, there's goodwill. And the first Labour Prime Minister in more than a decade says change will begin immediately.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today. Thank you very much.
Lucy Taylor, DW, in the UK.
And for more news from Europe, head to our website dw.com. I'm Helen Sini in Germany, and you're listening to Inside Europe. At the beginning of the month, Hungary took over the 6-month rotating presidency of the EU Council. That means Budapest is chairing meetings where ministers from all 27 countries discuss and agree on laws that will apply throughout the bloc. The presidency role is meant to foster continuity, cooperation and boost trust between member states. But Hungary's Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, is raising more hackles in Brussels. On Monday, he paid a surprise visit to Beijing for talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping to discuss a potential peace deal for Ukraine. That was just days after he visited Kyiv and Moscow. So, how worried should Brussels be about Orban exploiting Hungary's EU Council presidency to suit his own agenda? I put that to our correspondent in Budapest, Stefan Bors.
I think it is clearly a warning sign to Brussels that he will go his own way. He views the European Union presidency as a vehicle to promote peace. He has called it already basically Peace Mission 3.0, if you will. So I think that he is not really worried about what Brussels is saying, and there is also a reason for it. I think in his view, Hungary still expects billions of euros from the European Union, which it did not receive due to concerns about the rule of law here and so on. So I think he feels that he has not much to lose. And also, I think he wants to show that the European Union presidency is more than just hosting the meetings, if you will. He also views it as a personal mission, and this is what he said about it.
To make peace is a Christian action. If you would like to approach the peace on a political way, you start to become more and more bureaucratic. What kind of negotiation authority you have, what the council will say, what the high foreign policy representation of council will say. This is the duty I have to do now, because I remain the only Western leader who can have a chance to talk at the same time with Kiev and Moscow. All the others created a situation when they have no chance to direct communicate with the two main actors, especially with the Russians.
Yeah, so that is how he sees it, Helen. And of course, one of the reasons is also that he feels that he can be, because of that reason, he can be like a peace broker.
EU officials and leaders have been very quick to make it clear, though, that Orban does not speak for the bloc and he has no authority to negotiate on behalf of it. Presumably, though, Moscow and Beijing will also be making the most of Hungary's 6-month council presidency.
Absolutely. They view it as a way to keep the communications open with the West and the European Union. There is also another reason for China, because Hungary is a very important trade partner. Hungary is also hosting several battery plants for electric vehicles, a very crucial place for China. So I think that also plays a role. And of course, they view it as a way that they can still keep the communications open. Now, Orban realizes that there is a lot of criticism about his mission, including from the European Commission and the European Council. But this is what he said about it.
Reaction on the comments. So, guys, I understand that you are not used to that kind of behavior of the rotating President of the European Union. The last man who probably has done something similar was Nicolas Sarkozy, when the invasion of Russia happened on Georgia. And he went there and Sarkozy provided a political leadership, a political rotating presidency. So till then, everybody is and everything is rather bureaucratic. But if we consider this issue from a bureaucratic eyeglass, a bureaucratic approach, nothing will happen. Because peace cannot be generated by bureaucrats. It's impossible. Peace will not be born by itself.
And of course, what also is important for him is his concern about the Hungarian ethnic minority in Ukraine. There are about 150,000 Hungarians living in Ukraine. Some of them have already died at the front lines. Others have been injured. So that is also a personal mission as he views it. And also he says, why not try? This war has already killed hundreds of thousands of people perhaps. And he views it really as a way to establish peace. He does not believe that sending more weapons will actually bring the war to a close.
Stefan, Orban's now facing pressure domestically from a new opposition party, which won around 30% of the Hungarian vote in recent EU parliamentary elections. So how is his one-man diplomatic peace mission playing out in the home front?
Well, of course, you are quite right that he wants to put himself on the map. There have been a lot of scandals here, ranging from corruption to a pedophile scandal when someone accused of involvement in that got basically amnesty or a presidential pardon. And of course, that has also backfired towards Orban, who always put himself as a kind of protector of the traditional families. So this is clearly a way to show that he is relevant, that he puts Hungary on the map, and that he has the stature of being a statesman who is respected all around the world. Now, of course, mainly, I have to admit, by sort of autocratic leaders at this point, but yet that's still something he uses very heavily in his propaganda outlets and also on social media. And I think, to be quite honest, a lot of Hungarians like that. But it's clear that he faces growing opposition. There have been a lot of protests here, so we have to see if he can maintain this momentum heading towards new elections sooner or later. And I think that he will still face a major challenge from the opposition.
And I was talking there to our correspondent Stefan Bors in Budapest. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our email address is insideeurope@dw.com. We're always keen to hear your feedback on the show. This is Inside Europe, and I'm Helen Sini in Germany. This is Inside Europe, and I'm Helen Sini in Germany. Roses are red, violets are blue. There's nothing quite like flowers to brighten up our lives. But the thing about flowers is that they've got to be fresh, and we want them year-round. So, where do they come from? How are they grown? And how do they get to us? In the next half hour, we're handing over to our colleagues at Living Planet for a deep dive into the flower industry from the Netherlands. Here's host Kathleen Schuster, and the episode was compiled by Sam Baker.
This is Living Planet. I'm Kathleen Schuster.
It starts at 6 and it goes until all the flowers are sold.
We're inside the largest flower market in the world. Drivers on little forklifts zip through a labyrinth of refrigerated flowers in this warehouse which extends farther than the eye can see. This is Royal Flora Holland.
And an auctioneer is specialized in a typical product. So he is specialized in roses. He knows the market, he knows who the buyers are, he knows what the prices were the day before and what he can expect.
And despite it being the least busy day of their week, a Thursday, this place is bustling. If you've had the good fortune of flying through Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport in the spring, you may have seen the purple, red, and yellow fields of tulips out the window. They blanket more than 60,000 acres of the country. That's an area twice the size of Paris. Tourists from all over the world come to see these classic symbols of Dutch culture, including the ones you can hear behind us perusing tulip-themed trinkets in the Royal Flora Holland gift shop. Not even including the tourist influx attracted by tulip mania each year, tulips generate more than $2 billion for the Netherlands, mainly in the form of exported tulip bulbs shipped around the world to be grown elsewhere. But the Netherlands are more than just tulips. This country is a hub for the world's flower industry, making it the top exporter of cut flowers globally. We're just a 10-minute drive from Amsterdam's international airport, making it convenient for flowers from the Netherlands, but also from France and Kenya and Ethiopia to be shipped to Royal Flora Holland. They're then sold and shipped to buyers around Europe and even as far as the United States and Japan. 20 million flowers a day.
So that's quite a lot.
A lot indeed. So in this episode of Living Planet, we're going to get to the root of the flower industry's environmental footprint both here in the Netherlands and even as far away as East Africa. And we'll hear from some of the people who've woken up and smelled the roses, so to speak, and are planting seeds of change. The Netherlands' position in Europe, both logistically with one of the world's major airports and in terms of its floral history, is what makes it so central to the flower market.
The first auction was founded in Aalsmeer in 1911. It started in a pub where the growers placed their products on the billiard.
That's Michel van Schie again, spokesperson for Royal Flora Holland and our guide through this famous and rather old flower auction. So before 1911, flower buyers had been sneaking around and taking advantage of the growers.
And they were going to all the growers in the neighborhood and they told the grower, your neighbor sells the product for a lower price.
Growers quickly caught on though, and they decided to form an auction to sell all of their flowers together. Michel says this helped usher in transparency to the market, so soon every village had one. Over time, they merged together into bigger and bigger flower auctions. In 2008, the two largest ones became Flora Holland, and in 2011, they got to add the word royal to their name.
Royal, because you can only be royal when you're more than 100 years old.
Today, over 2,000 cooperative members, the flower growers, sell their products at Royal Flora Holland. About a quarter of those are sellers from abroad, and each weekday, 2,500 buyers bid on their products, from Dutch tulips to Kenyan roses.
So now everything is done by remote buying. And over here you can see how the clock works.
There's an auction clock that counts down from 60 seconds, following the announcement of each particular flower. Let's say this clock is for Easter lilies. The clock begins at the highest price for that batch of Easter lilies, and as it counts down, the price too goes down. So buyers have to press a button at the time and price they're willing to pay for those Easter lilies. Press too late, and the Easter lilies might already have been bought up by somebody else. Press too soon, and the buyer will be paying an extra cent more.
And you could say 1 cent, it's not that much. But when you buy millions of products in a year and you pay for every stem 1 cent extra, it's quite a lot of money. So that's the game they have to play.
Once the flowers are sold, they're taken out of cool storage and drivers pick them up.
This is a system which brings the trolleys to the other side of the road where the main buyers are located. And this system is in total 15 kilometers long.
It's a massive operation of tiny forklifts zipping around, transporting those hypothetical Easter lilies to us in floral shops and grocery stores.
So flowers that are cut yesterday, brought here during the night, can be in Germany at the end of the afternoon.
When the buyers are deciding on which varieties they'd like to buy each day, there's one more thing they can see on the auction clocks as well.
They can see what are the sustainability certificates a grower has. And it's for the benefit of the whole flower industry that we be as transparent as possible about the way the products are produced. And of course, there are many different aspects when you are talking about sustainability.
Yes, that's for sure. When I hear this, I can't help but think of my own local grocery store. The first thing I see when I walk in are bouquets of delicate pink roses, bright yellow sunflowers, and my personal favorite, peach-colored tulips. And they all cost just a couple of euros. But all of those euros add up to a $34 billion cut flower industry. An industry that's, as you might have guessed, heavily reliant on water and pesticides, and air travel too, because flowers are one of the very few things we ship by plane. While nearly everything we buy these days travels by container ships, an option that's cheap and relatively slow, cut flowers are one of the few goods that go bad so quickly they need to be sent on a plane. For each extra day a flower has to travel, it loses 15% of its value. But air freight generates 47 times as much emissions as a container ship. In fact, for consumers in the UK, a bouquet of imported flowers had a more significant impact than an 8-ounce steak from deforested land in the Brazilian Amazon. And lots of flowers today are imported. Colombia and Ecuador account for many flowers sold in the US, and Europe mainly imports from Ethiopia and Kenya.
Tambuzi is a medium-scale flower farm that started way back in 1996. It's located at the equator, base of Mount Kenya. My name is Christine Shikuku, and it's been over 2 decades now that I've been involved with Tambuzi.
At Tambuzi, where Kristen's the general manager, they mainly grow roses, and those roses supply weddings and events all over the world.
We mainly sell across 5 continents in the world, mainly Europe, Asia, Australia, Africa, and recently North America.
While it might seem easy from an environmental perspective to say, just don't buy imported flowers, Kristen says this industry has massively impacted her community.
The main farm for Tambuzi is located in a community called Baguret. It's quite in the rural Kenya. And Tambuzi is the major employer. We have more than 75% of our 251 employees who work in this main farm come from this very community.
She says it's an open farm, no electric fences, transparent policies only. They also work together closely with local leaders on how to strengthen the community.
Like, for example, recently we had our big client support us to buy water storage tanks for our employees. They take it home. And who benefits? It's not just the Tambuzi employee, it's the family. And some of them even opened it up to their neighbors. So the community indirectly benefits from Tambuzi.
They've also helped build a medical lab close by and helped fund a wide array of programs aimed at helping kids thrive in school and sports. After tea, flowers, especially roses, had become Kenya's second largest export and one of its largest sources of employment, providing 200,000 jobs directly and supporting an additional 2 million indirectly. Pressures on the industry have also pushed Kenyan growers to adopt more sustainable practices. For Tambuzi, that started with water.
20 years ago, the floriculture was such in the limelight. There was negative publicity because of the things that were happening. And so the communities around flower farms would go up in arms and say, you're taking all the water. All these challenges made the floriculture industry be innovative so that they carry out good practices to be able to be sustainable in the communities they're carrying out the business.
For example,
we do harvest rainwater from our greenhouse roofs, store them in lagoons that we build, and then irrigate from there. In fact, we do not do direct abstraction from the river Bagret. The river crosses through our farm, and we made a deliberate decision 15 years ago never ever to abstract directly from the river. We recycle treated wastewater. We use constructed wetlands to treat our wastewater and then recycle back for irrigation.
When it comes to carbon emissions, the footprint of each rose is still high because they're flown to their destinations. In fact, Kenya exports so many flowers that Nairobi's Jomo Kenyatta International Airport has a dedicated flower terminal for flights full of flowers headed to places like Germany, the UK, the Middle East, and of course, the Netherlands. Kristen, who's responsible for Tambuzi's various certifications, says the farm has been offsetting its carbon footprint by using solar energy and tree planting. But flights aren't the only environmental concern here. Back in Europe, the other big source of greenhouse gas emissions from the flower industry come from, well, greenhouses.
The heating provided to the cut flowers to develop, that is quite substantial, especially in Dutch condition, to force the bulbs to flower.
Northern Europe is not a place that can support year-round cultivation without heated and well-lit greenhouses. This heat is supplied primarily by fossil fuels like methane gas and coal, and to a lesser but growing extent, renewable energy like wind and solar. There aren't many people who've studied the environmental impacts of the flower industry, but we did manage to find one.
Oh, yes, yes. I have a particular interest in cut flower, generally speaking. I have them at home. I always used to cultivate a small orchard with some roses, some tulips, some narcissus. My name is Pietro Goglio, and I'm senior researcher at the Department of Agriculture, Food and Environmental Science at the University of Perugia.
Pietro has studied floriculture practices in the Netherlands, and he says there are two big environmental problems with the industry: pesticides, which we'll come back to shortly, and greenhouse gas emissions, as we've been discussing. The emissions from actual greenhouses make a particularly big difference.
And therefore, if we are producing roses during wintertime, they have different impact, at least in Europe, than the same product during summertime, just for the simple reason of seasonality.
Heating greenhouses doesn't just contribute to emissions. It can also be expensive for farmers. In fact, this was actually the drive behind flower production shifting to warmer climates, like in Kenya in the 1970s, when an oil crisis forced many U.S. and European greenhouses to close up shop. Growers in Israel and Morocco, East Africa, and Latin America filled the gap. Farms like Tambuzi don't need to heat their greenhouses. Surprisingly, this move to warmer and further climates wasn't the worst outcome when it comes to climate-changing greenhouse gas emissions. Multiple studies have found that the emissions from transporting Kenyan flowers to Europe by air, while huge, are actually lower than those emitted by heated Dutch greenhouses.
So there is a trade-off, I would say, between these two aspects.
Certainly, renewable energy sources could change this, and the Dutch government and its horticulture sector have agreed to reduce emissions from greenhouses.
For sure, energy cost is going to be a drive for increasing the efficiency of the systems. And this is something that could make by itself the system more sustainable.
Now, the other big concern in floriculture, cultivating flowers that is pesticides. As we mentioned, the Netherlands is, of course, famous for its tulips. Less well known is the fact that tulips account for 8% of the pesticides used in the country. And European agriculture really relies on chemical pesticides. They help farmers guarantee they can deliver perfect-looking flowers. But pesticide exposure has been linked to Parkinson's disease in humans, and its impact on other biodiversity has been devastating. These chemical toxins are affecting pollinators, creatures that actually help us grow things like food and flowers. Pesticide residues have been routinely found in pollen and nectar and also in bee colonies. A landmark German study from 2017 found that flying insects in protected areas had declined by about 75% since 1989. Pesticides were a main driver.
Oh, here we see the bumblebee. Yeah, it's like a sweet for him. He's attracted by the sugar, and meanwhile he helps the flower to pollinate. Yeah, that's why we do it.
We've come to a small organic flower farm a little over an hour from Amsterdam to meet someone who's trying to change the way flowers are grown in the Netherlands. His name?
Yeah, Martin Uting. We have an organic flower farm since 2007 with a very enthusiastic team. Yeah, we are in Wageningen at Kwekerij Bloemrijk. We grow organic flowers for the local market.
Their specialty is dahlias, but they sell hundreds of different species of flowers too.
We grow flowers that people know already, but we also look for the surprise element that people say from, oh, what a beautiful flower, and it's also organic. Here you see the cornflower. It's the mountain cornflower. Yeah, it's very deep blue. Yeah, and they started flowering this week.
With a handful of other organic growers, Martin created Biologische Sierteelt Nederland, an association to represent organic flower farmers and their interests. It now has about 50 members.
I experience a cycle of change. There's a lot of concern nowadays with biodiversity and a healthier world. And we experience that more people buy organic flowers.
Martin's organic business is obviously going well. There's only one lone tulip left in the field.
Usually as a flower farmer, we do our utmost best to cut all the flowers there are. Sometimes I make a joke when you see a flower farm with flowering fields, it's not going very well with this business. Yeah.
And organic success is even drawing more flower farmers. Their numbers doubled this year, and even bigger growers went in on the action.
So we work together with a big bulb farmer, flower bulb farmer, and he has 70 hectares. So it's really possible. Yeah, it's also possible to do it on a large scale, and growers look at each other. When, for example, the big grower with 12 acres, when he can do it, his neighbors think, oh, then maybe I can also do it. And when there's the auction block in the Plantation, it's really serious. Yesterday I spoke him and he was applause from the sellers, and it's at this moment there's a vibe, there's a national attention.
Consumers help create this vibe, Martin says, by talking to their local florists.
When different customers ask for organic flowers, it gets his attention. Also at the same auction block yesterday, a flower shop owner came to the grower and he thought that this weekend 4 customers asked for organic flowers, and that's why he was interested in the organic flowers. As a customer, you can really make a difference.
Growing flowers without pesticides may not always be easy work, but as Martin points out, it's nothing that hasn't been done before. When it comes to weeding,
it's a bit like before the pesticides were there, also farmers did it by hand.
But even with some returning to farmers' chemical-free routes, pesticides are still everywhere.
I always believe there is a way out, but I must say that, well, it's worrying. It's not very comforting to realize that these pesticides are all over the place, that they are everywhere, and you can't avoid them.
Every year, 350,000 tons of pesticides are sold in the European Union.
My name is Max Haan, and I'm an independent lawyer, and I do a lot of work for Mobilization for the Environment, a Dutch environmental NGO. I don't buy any cut flowers anymore because they are a really heavy user of pesticides, so to say. So yeah, well, but that's a personal choice you have to make.
Seated at a long table in his living room, Max tells us that there are two main regulations in the Netherlands concerning pesticides. One applies to the farmers and the other to the water quality.
From scientific research, we know that pesticides also travel through air and they are being washed out by rain. So after it's being applied by the farmer, it spreads. It's spreading all over the place. And so we're realizing at this moment that we are kind of living under a pesticide blanket here in the Netherlands and presumably also in other European countries.
Rather than taking legal action against farmers on this issue, Mobilization for the Environment, or MOB, is focusing on the government offices that should be enforcing rules laid out in the European Water Framework Directive, rules that limit pesticides in bodies of water. Max says the Netherlands has a gigantic network of monitoring points for pesticides. He and his team check the data. If they find levels that are too high, they report it to the government.
We're still in an initial stage, but our first impression is that it's a widespread problem in the Netherlands.
Of course, these pesticides aren't just coming from flower farmers, but as we heard earlier, flowers do make up a sizable chunk of the pesticide pie. A major concern is how much of these pesticides are entering our drinking water.
We see that in a lot of cases, the levels of pesticides in the water are way too high. The government is basically focusing on the behavior of the farmers. So they should apply the pesticides properly, using the right equipment and things like this, and the right doses, etc., etc. But that's all on a voluntary basis, and nobody's ever checking what a farmer is doing in practice when he's out in the field.
His team is demanding the government enforce its own rules. So what's the government's reaction been?
The first reaction was very interesting because, as I said, what we do is we confront the government with its own data. So the first reaction was, okay, thank you very much. We will first check whether these data are correct. So we were like, okay, that's interesting. Because if they are correct, then, well, that's exactly the point that we want to make. And if they're not correct, then the government has a different problem, that they are not able to manage their data and to do proper data collection. So, well, now the second reaction is we have looked at our data and they are correct. Not very surprising. And now we were waiting for the third reaction, what they are going to do about it.
Despite MOB's efforts, regulations seem to always be one step behind pesticides.
They have a scientific basis, but the norms are usually revised every 6 years. But in those 6 years, a lot of scientific development take place, and some pesticides are being banned, others are allowed. So the list of pesticides are almost never up to date, so to say. So we're always kind of lagging behind.
KWR, an independent water research institute in the Netherlands, actually found 7 recently approved pesticides to already be at levels above the drinking water quality standards. And when new pesticides are in the process of being approved for use, they remain on the market in the EU while the assessment is being conducted. So substances being used today could be destined for the banned list next year, but are still being applied nonetheless. Going after one local water regulator at a time may sound tedious, but Max explains that the more cases they're able to win, the more the government will start enforcing its own rules without prompting.
Our societies are based on the rule of law, so if a judge says that the government should follow its own rules, then usually that's the beginning of a kind of a change in the attitude of the government. If you use this legal instrument often enough, then it can really help to build up the pressure and make the government see that it has to change certain things in its own behavior.
MOB is a small organization, but it's prompting change in the Netherlands. So, reflecting on our visit to the organic flower farm and after speaking with Max, which has a bigger impact, our pocketbook or civil engagement?
Of course, it's both. But I personally believe that consumer action is very important. It's not a problem that's really easily fixed. And at this moment, it's kind of wishful thinking. If we make more regulations, if we do a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, but they should go to the core of the root of the problem and have the debate that we have to have as a society as a whole.
Sometimes we have to adapt, and we must not forget about what the importance is of this industry, not only for the Netherlands.
Back at Royal Flora Holland, Michelle agrees that there are things the flower industry can do better. And institutions like Royal Flora Holland are raising their standards. Michelle tells us their management board recently decided that all of their growers must be FSI certified, that's Floriculture Sustainability Initiative, by 2027. But is this just a bit of greenwashing? Do these certifications really mean anything? Pietro Goglio says this is a good step towards sustainability, but wonders how transparent and publicly available the data will be in the end.
Well, let's say that for a consumer that does not know too much about certification and labeling, it's a little bit complicated between different labeling. For sure, the PFCR is going to be a standardized method, and it is the outcome of a very long process between scientists and research institution and the main actor in the value chain.
Bear with me for a second. PEFCR doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but it stands for the Product Environmental Footprint Category Rules. Basically, it's a measurement system for the environmental impacts of agricultural products proposed by the European Commission. And the Floriculture Sustainability Initiative supports use of this measurement system to evaluate flowers too. But how are consumers supposed to keep all of this straight?
Of course, a florist knows where the flowers are coming from. So he can make that claim for sure when he buys it himself. He knows it because it's on the clock. And we are heading to a system that's it's Flora PECR, if I say it correctly, where the footprint of a flower will be on stem level. So then you know what is the footprint of a bouquet.
QR codes for chrysanthemums and carnations. That's the idea. In some ways, it harkens back to the flower auction's founding as a way to offer transparency and create a level playing field among growers.
Kathleen Schuster with that episode of Living Planet, which was compiled by Sam Baker. It's available on all podcast platforms, as is, of course, Inside Europe, and would really appreciate it if you can give the shows a rating. That helps other listeners to find us. Hope you enjoyed this week's programme. It was produced with help from sound engineer Thomas Schmidt. And I'm Helen Sini. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back at the same time next week. Inside Europe comes to you from DW in Germany.